It's really exciting to be with all of you today to share what we've been working on over the last 2 years, known as the Finternet. I've been privileged to be a part of the team that's built 3+ billion user ecosystems across identity, payments, data sharing. And what we realized is, if we look at the way we've been traditionally building financial infrastructure, it takes a long time. It's very purpose-specific. You're building things from scratch, asset by asset, sector by sector, country by country. And then when you try to interlink these systems, imagine 5 years into 190 countries, that's going to take a few centuries to build out. And the reason for that is every time we build infrastructure, it's like you take a new car and you build a new road in the financial system, right? So you have separate rails for P2P payments, separate rails for peer-to-merchant payments, separate rails for government-to-person payouts, and these are highly siloed, extremely slow, and expensive to transact. And this is really how technology starts off. It starts off in a very purpose-specific manner, but eventually converges. We saw that play out with the internet. We saw that play out with smartphones as they opened up programmable playgrounds. And we felt the same is happening to financial infrastructure in today's world. So we published the Finternet as a paper last year in Washington, DC. And there are 3 core ideas. One, giving users control over any type of asset, identity, credential, or asset. And these assets could be, for example, regulated assets like money, securities, registered assets, anything that has a registrar behind them, like physical property, vehicles, attested assets like gold, silver, any type of commodity, or user-controlled assets that are there, digital assets, NFTs, and so on. And across this entire spectrum of assets, the key question we're after is unlocking verifiability, which is provenance, and transactability of these assets, the ability to transfer financially, but also transfer property rights. Let's say I'm transferring a property over ownership of it to you, or transferring certain rental property rights across to you, which you then get financed. The second idea behind the Finternet is how, across these different types of assets, do we unify them into a common playground, ensuring that the rules, depending on the sector, depending on the authority, can be programmed. And the third idea is how do you build that on highly universal rails? Because you've got 100 countries that have a population less than 10 million. They can't build infrastructure from scratch. How do you have universal rails, much like your smartphone operating system? But depending on the type of asset that's flowing on those rails, you can control the flows and ensure your own sovereignty and autonomy. And so really a large part of this relies on tokenization. And in my view, this is sort of back to the future, because if you think about it in the world of physical cash that you had, let's say you gave me a dollar bill, I could instantly take that dollar bill, it was mine, verify it, validate it. I didn't have to talk to any other third party. But when we digitized these systems, what happened is for that same transaction, now your bank's validation systems and its ledgers had to talk to my bank and its ledgers and its validation systems. And that created a lot of the bilateral complexity that we see. But if we look at the cryptographic developments of public blockchains, digital signatures, and the like, it allows us to imagine a paradigm where you're sort of going back to that world of control over any type of asset. Think of, again, equity shares in the old days. You could transfer it to me. We could meet at midnight. You hand it over. It's mine. But today, the markets don't work beyond 9 to 5, right, because of the digitization that happened. So in our view, tokenization sort of takes us back to that original world, but obviously with a lot of the characteristics that technology brings in. And this is a high-level view of the Finternet. You can read more. If you go to finternetlab.io, there are a set of papers that are published on how do we leverage public chains, how do you solve for transactions at scale to do 1 billion transactions a day, how do you ensure you have universal interoperability across different asset types, how do you take care of privacy, how do you have private transactions on public rails. So these are some of the key technological questions that we're working on so that you can create a playground where regulators can regulate on one end and innovators can innovate. So since we published this paper, We are setting up a network of Finternet labs. We've set up one in the US. We have one in India. We are setting up one in Switzerland and Singapore very soon over the next few months to really work out a lot of these important questions. In fact, the Solana community as well has $1 million grant for people building on the Finternet, but there's a broad ecosystem that's come together to really experiment many of the ideas that we've laid out in the paper. And our goal is to then eventually see how do you take crypto and a lot of its primitives, but deploy this at population scale for societies across the world. And there are a few pilots. One of the pilots that I wanted to show you was on the topic of identity, because in many crypto conversations, there's a big issue of how do you take care of individual or legal person identity. And so one of the efforts we've been doing, which we've talked about in the paper, is how do you have layered proofing? That is, depending on the risk in a transaction, how do you layer on the identity requirements? So this is an example we built using the legal entity identifier. Could they play the video, please? So what you have out here is a Finternet wallet. In your Finternet wallet, let's say I'm launching a campaign that says, OK, only accredited companies on the other end that also have a legal entity identifier can contribute to that campaign. So now I import my own LEI into the wallet. I create a campaign. Donors onboard their own LEIs into the wallet, which is what you're seeing out here. And then they can make a donation. And when they do, you can now check whether the donation satisfies the proof requirements that are required. So this is a very basic example, but really you can now extrapolate that to different KYC requirements and their proof requirements across the world. Go to the next slide, please. So there has been broad support behind the Finternet, both across public authorities as well as private sector. So I'll urge all of you to sign up, register, be a volunteer. Thank you so much.